Imagine being able to access sensor and satellite imagery, civilian smartphones, and other publicly available information in real time to inform tactical and operational decisions. If that sounds like a good idea, you might not be in the intel community. Could we or should we use that data? Here with a legal perspective on that question is Al Broadbent, an attorney at Womble Bond Dickinson. Mr. Broadbent, thank you for joining me in studio today.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
You served in, if I get this right, the Mission and International Law Division of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So you know a little bit about how difficult it is to confirm intelligence information actionable in an operational environment. You're now proposing real-time use of crowdsourced data. That seems to me like a pretty big swing in perspective. So help me understand how you got from there to here.
Well, so NGA was a great opportunity for me to understand how we can use multiple layers of information to provide a really enriched view of the battlefield for decision makers. Crowdsourced data is actually not new. We've been using crowdsourced data for decades. The first uses of crowdsourced data was for mariners. Notices to mariners. Remember the Titanic? They used to send out telegrams as they encountered icebergs or they encountered obstacles at sea, and that got distributed out to the world so that mariners would not hit an object or run aground. Over time, we continue to use crowdsourced information to get the most up-to-date information that we can. I use crowdsourced information to get to this interview today. I used Waze, right? So that's updated regularly. Apple Maps updates regularly. Your weather data is updated by people. Maps, I would say just about every application that we as Americans are accustomed to using on our iPhone today has some component of crowdsourced information to enrich the data and make it more location relevant.
But using crowdsourced data to navigate on the highway is very different from using it in a real-life military operation.
That's correct.
Is there a process now that kind of crowdsourced real-time data would go through to get validated for an operation or an operational use?
Typically, what we're seeing now with the advent of artificial intelligence is that most companies don't sell crowdsourced data as an independent or segregated data set. Typically, it's integrated with other data aggregators, pull in crowdsourced data to provide a really holistic data set for whatever purpose that you might be using it for. So, for instance, Nielsen, or I guess Nielsen's a good one, they use stringers to go out and get information about, let's say, the price of bread in Aleppo, or, certain market drivers. That's then incorporated into reporting. That's then fed out to their community of subscribers. Same thing happens on the commercial side. Same thing could happen for Department of Defense or intelligence community or U.S. government users.
But if you were, say, an infantry company commander in a real-life operation, what kind of crowdsourced information are you talking about now that you think that infantry commander could have that would make a difference in his operation?
An infantry commander, we used to have a saying that every soldier is a collector, and that's true. Think about the crowd, the unit as a crowd. But to bring it back to what the commander could do with crowdsourced data is get hyper-local information and even sentiment data about what's going on around him in a particular region. So if I were deployed to a location where I didn't exactly understand the culture, crowdsourced data might allow me to overcome those cultural biases, might allow me to better understand the situations that I'm walking into because the crowd is hyperlocal. It's from the region.
Wouldn't you be concerned that that infantry commander might not have the cultural awareness to understand the data that they're looking at?
That's true, but that's where you layer in other data to enrich it and to make it more understandable and relevant to the particular individual who's consuming the data.
I'm speaking with Al Broadbent. He's an attorney at Womble Bond Dickinson. All right, so let's play this out. In our hat as the infantry company commander, where would that person normally get their operational intel?
So it's typically derived from a variety of sources, from your own network on the ground, from operational sources, and then national sources like the CIA or the Defense Intelligence Agency or any of the other intelligence agencies like NGA if they needed imagery. So those are typically layered and distilled. As you get closer to the edge, though, it is harder to derive that information because typically communications and the data pipes are constrained. So having something that commanders and soldiers are accustomed to using that rides on a cellular network that doesn't consume as much data than those national huge feeds is a lot more responsive and reactive to those individual commanders' needs.
So you're trading validated information for timeliness. Would you be concerned that the timely local crowdsourced data is not reliable, that it's faked, it's spoofed, you don't know how much of it you can trust?
Yes, but you can bake in to the technology, to the collection mechanisms, ways to ensure that the information is credible and reliable.
So what do we need to change in the current policy structure or the regulation structure or the practice to make this a trusted source that the intelligence community would generally agree on?
Right. So the intelligence community has procedures that already exist to do what's called coordination and deconfliction. So if you're conducting a human intelligence operation, or let's just say an intelligence operation, and you're a member of the Department of Defense, you have to conduct what's called Intelligence Community Directive 304, deconfliction and coordination, which means, simply put, you've got to coordinate and deconflict your human intelligence activities with the CIA because we don't want to be using the same sources and kind of knocking each other over. The problem with applying that deconfliction or that ICD to regular operations is the fact that they're not intelligence operations, simply put. And what it does is it injects the intelligence community into what's a statutorily designated chain of command. And we don't want that to happen. What we want to do is apply intelligence standards, rules, and regulations to intelligence operations and apply operational rules and regulations to regular operations.
Deconflicting regulations is a noble goal.
It is indeed.
How would you actually do it?
The Department of Defense has struggled with this for some years now. The crux of the issue revolves around what is human-enabled activity? And does human-enabled activity, notice the word human is in there, does that cross the line into human intelligence activities that triggers that ICD 304 coordination? What the department has tried to do is to define those activities fairly broadly, but unfortunately, those directives have essentially stalled the acquisition of crowdsourced information or data sources because the bureaucrats are still struggling with the definition, with how to apply it, with what the triggers should be. So what Deputy Secretary of Defense did a few years ago was they issued a classified memorandum that said that if you're conducting human-enabled activities, you're going to have to conduct ICD 304 coordination. Now I have a question for you. If I am a crowdsourced data provider and my crowdsourced network consists of 6 million contributors, how would the CIA conduct deconfliction and coordination on that network?
Well, my guess is you're telling us that this is already in use at the practical level, and you're looking for the more formal guidance to define those kinds of terms.
Right. What I'm saying is that it's technically impossible to implement that type or conduct that type of deconfliction on a network that's a double-blind network that consists of millions and millions of contributors. So there's other ways that you can implement controls and safeguards to ensure what you were hitting on to begin with, the reliability of the information as it's coming through those